Hello and welcome to another episode of Jim and Parker's Excellent Podcast.
Excellent.
And with it today, we come to you with a quite somber episode, but one we thought was, long overdue considering local or global circumstances, but also just given everything going on. And today we are talking about Black Panther, really in regards to that, with Chadwick Boseman's most familiar and probably arguably greatest performance. In rest in peace to a wonderful actor, a wonderful human being who really defied expectations when you look back on considering how he continued to fight and work for his masterpieces and everything while dealing with cancer. It's a truly remarkable actor and human being. And, you know, I think we unfortunately lost someone who died too early. We were only beginning to see the greatness of his acting, and not only that, but also of his humanity and how he has such an impact on people. And so today we wanted to take just a few minutes just to talk about his, most memorable performance, the one that had the greatest impact for so many people, especially for those of, people of color and everything out there.
Yeah, indeed. When we heard the news that Chadwick Boseman had passed away, it just absolutely sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and throughout the world. And for me personally, seeing the film Black Panther with my mother, we both agreed it was a marvelous film. And I couldn't wait to see more of both T'Challa, the character of Black Panther, as well as more performances from Chadwick Boseman. His career really was on the up and up. Parker and I had both seen 42, in which he played Jackie Robinson. He was splendid in that film. But we chose Black Panther really because this is the film that really has defied a generation and has left such an impact on pop culture that just truly can't be denied. And it's not just based on the strength of Boseman, but it's also the talent behind the camera and the supporting cast with it, and just a very perfectly well told story. And probably the most challenging thematic Marvel film up until, I'd argue, Infinity War.
Very possibly. I think if we look at the Marvel movies and really where they come to, I think the one that, besides the Avengers movie, the very first one, I would argue maybe Captain America Civil War really challenged like the perspective that we had within a Marvel movie.
Very true.
But where the beauty lies within Black Panther, which is really amazing considering all the other Marvel films that existed out there, is that it brought us into a world that felt completely alien, but yet we were brought into it and it was so believable. When you consider that, we had the Thor world with Asgard and everything, obviously there was Iron Man and Captain America within Earth itself. We have Guardians of the Galaxy and everything. But considering how late this movie came in, it felt like a believable world that we were breathing and living in. It was so amazing how there wasn't even, not even from the first second, we were just in this film. We were in this world, and along with it, all the performances that went along with it were just so amazing. This film really doesn't skip a beat, which I think does attribute to why it was a Best Picture nominee. I don't think there's any doubt that, this film was an amazing film. I will admit, back when the original Oscars came out, I wasn't sure that Best Picture, if it was worth that or not. But looking back on it, it really is just a spectacular film to live and breathe within. It really builds also, along with that, not only the world, also the lore within it. It builds this whole history, archaeology, and architecture within it that you really feel like you're a part of when this film gets going on with it as well.
And you just absolutely put your finger on it. When indeed the Oscars came out, it did receive a historic Best Picture nomination for a superhero film. Not even the best superhero films of the past, such as Dark Knight, Superman, Avengers, any of those great films had ever received one. And there was some minor controversy about it, but I never bought the controversy. I completely was sold. And it is true. It's simply because it's what really impressed me on the rewatch was just how completely separate it can be as a Marvel film. It can very much stand on its own as both a coming of age tale as T'Challa assumes the throne of Wakanda, but it also serves as a very as a very challenging narrative in the Killmonger character played by Michael B. Jordan of just the anger of oppression and the separation from a culture and what it can do to a person. It's very much a nature versus nurture story. And I will admit this one thing that very much disappointed me about the Oscars was Michael B. Jordan did not receive a supporting actor nomination. And I'm not sure if because the best actor race was very strong that year. I don't know if Boseman would have cracked it, but he was very close. He was very close to it. And his performance as T'Challa, continuing from Captain America: Civil War, is very well put. He really sold me as somebody who wanted to follow the traditions, but in his own heart felt that things needed to change. And that's another theme in this film. There's so many great themes at play of change versus progress and how you go about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think you just highlighted a big point for me that Michael B. Jordan, I think, is the best actor in this entire film. As much as we are doing this because, or not because, but in respect of Chadwick Boseman, his passing away, and this is his most iconic role and everything, Michael B. Jordan was the best actor, had the best performance in this movie. Yeah. Much how Heath Ledger was in The Dark Knight, which is very interesting, I think, when you consider all of those great movies that by great supporting acts or actresses really bring that film to another level. I think this is another case of it. And really looking at Michael B. Jordan's performance, he brings so much hate and animosity that doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of, many of the points that I think we're seeing in a modern day, especially within 2020, of a lot of, problems within at least American culture, which obviously his character was left in Oakland, California, where, I'm from originally. Though I don't share his struggles because I am not the same race and everything, and not the same skin color. But, it comes from this, and I think, which is also a theme later on of like African American versus just African. And I think he really does deliver that great performance with so much like hatred and rage against the system that has been built up. Maybe within like at least American society, but within minority societies. And I think, at least again within 2020, a point that we're seeing a lot more protests and a lot more voices finally kind of coming to the foreground of, more like not modern, but everyday Americana, I guess. I think I wouldn't say that living in modern day 2020 we're seeing a very similar movement that we saw with the 1960s civil rights movement. I think that we're kind of seeing something similar along those lines. And he carries a lot of that emotion. Granted, this performance was a few years ago. It was what, 4 years ago?
2
years? Sorry, 2 years ago. And we're seeing a lot of those same emotions that are still very present, real. And he embodies all of that. So,
yes,
I think Michael B. Jordan was the best performance in that because of it. Again, because of so many factors that built into it.
Indeed. And while I do agree that Michael B. Jordan had the best performance, I think the reason why Chadwick Boseman has become so beloved is the fact that there are very few African American superheroes. In fact, Michael B. Jordan actually got a lot of death threats for playing the Flame in the Fantastic Four reboot, which to me is absolutely sick because he did a very good job in a very bad film. But I think there have been black superheroes before, but very few. And this one was given the proper budget and the proper respect from the studio and by the audience too, to really up the stakes and play in a really major market in a way that no other had before. And one of the best things that Disney did was the Marvel Cinematic Universe is not much populated with, shall we say, cinematic directors. Many of them do a very good job, but a lot of them are not top name talent. Some should be, but most of the time, as per the Disney model, they don't tend to hire big name directors. But in this case, they hired Ryan Coogler, who is one of the greatest directors working today. He started with Fruitvale Station, which I loved, and he wrote and directed Creed. Again, loved that film. Great performance by Michael B. Jordan. And when he came on, he had a lot of respect, and he knew that there had to be a believable world. And so there was a very good blend of practical sets, very good costuming, uses very strong colors. And in the production design as well, there were a lot of combinations of certain African tribes. There was a lot of patterns and a lot of authenticity. This Wakanda just felt like an incredible real world.
Mm-hmm.
Very few Marvel films did. Even Asgard. Well, Asgard, it was meant to be this very grandiose, operatic, fairy tale Norse world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Wakanda is supposed to be a blend of old versus new, traditional versus modern. And again, it's perfectly designed for the conflict between Killmonger and T'Challa, which is Killmonger says, you have the resources and you're hiding them. We need that. But what pushes it too far is that he wants to wage war, whereas T'Challa does not. And he comes around to realize, yes, he does have a point. We should open our borders pretty much and spread our wealth, which is a very progressive idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned this to Parker last night during our rewatch, which was when I watch a film like The Lion King remake, which is supposed to be a photorealistic interpretation, even though it's all made in the computer, of Africa, it is one of the blandest, most sickly looking color palettes I've ever seen. And anybody who knows anything about Africa knows it's a gorgeous nation, absolutely splendid.
100%.
The colors, the topography, the people, the culture, and in those films, it's really disgraceful. Whereas here, because part of it's helped too by director of photography Rachel Morrison working with the production designer and Ryan Coogler, the colors are simply beautiful, even when they're digitally manipulated, because a lot of the Marvel films are. It's just, when I saw that sunset that they were talking about in the script, it was a beautiful sunset. And again, the world was just so enveloping. It's so believable that you could believe these absolutely great characters can live in it. And I think that's another reason why this movie stands above a lot of, not just the Marvel films, but a lot of films that year. Was every character was great in the film.
Mm-hmm. And this goes back to a point that you brought up last night, that if they took this out of the MCU and had it as its own standalone film, it would be just as good.
Yeah.
It didn't need to, much kind of like Captain America Civil War and other films, it didn't need to rely on other like worlds or other characters or anything else in order to survive on its own. It really did. It stood on its own. Everything within is believable.
Yeah.
You see all these different, like you said, vibrant cultures, different landscapes and everything, which, by the way, this is a beautifully shot film. I'm not sure I really realized that the first time I watched it, but watching it again last night, it is so gorgeous. It really shows the beauty of the continent that is Africa.
Yeah.
Which, I feel like this may be, or like some people, especially Western societies, think like Africa's like, oh, it's like, desert sands. There's not a whole lot there. It's, especially in the central part of the country, or excuse me, continent. It is so gorgeous. It is so beautiful, and this film just puts that all on display. And with that, it is, it really does stand on its own. It doesn't need to live in a cinematic universe where it has all these other things. It really does just stand on its own, which is, I think, when we look at all these other Marvel movies, I kind of made the reference last night to how Iron Man, kind of in a sense, that the first Iron Man movie, that was its own standalone thing. Like, kind of, it was the beginning of the entire MCU.
Yeah.
But it was so great because it felt like it could stand on its own. And Black Panther is very much the same. Almost 8 years later, of all these other things or films, excuse me, and it works so well because of it.
And not only can it stand on its own, but when you have a really great story and great characters, that also helps a superhero film, because I always reference this with Parker. When I talk about Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve or The Dark Knight, those films work as solid dramas. They can stand on their own 2 feet, as separate from their roots and separate from their sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, yes. And a lot of the reason too is, again, it comes down to these rich themes that are woven into the screenplay. And one of the biggest ones that I didn't quite catch on my first viewing was the themes of family, because T'Challa actually has a pretty big existential crisis about his father in this film.
Mm-hmm.
We see that in Civil War. Their relationship was good, occasionally disagreement, but still a very good relationship. And they discovered this secret about the past, that T'Chaka, the former the former king, did something very despicable to his own family and cut off Killmonger from Wakanda, left him stranded in Oakland. Though, of course, Ryan Coogler having a film in Oakland is quite normal.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes, he's born and raised in Oakland, right?
yeah,
Or Vallejo, or the East
yeah,
Bay. I think. East Bay,
he's
California.
a Bay Area guy.
Yeah.
But that again, that's a very challenging thing to do, and it's quite good in as a dramatic standpoint, because at the beginning, when he becomes the king, he visits what's called the ancestral plane, which is a beautiful shade of purple, and the African trees. It's just, that's one of the most magical scenes I've seen in all of cinema. And he's deeply respectful of his father, but when he goes back again to be reborn, I was shocked by how angry he was and how he essentially rejects his past, like what he's been taught.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very interesting thing to do nowadays, because a lot of, especially in this country, a lot of people are desperately clinging to hold on to the past. And in many ways, we're regressing back into it. And I think that's why Black Panther is still quite potent. Even now into 2020, you were saying this earlier. It can be a very potent movie to think about. Even though it's from Disney, it's a superhero film. It doesn't mean you can't smuggle a good message in there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And I kind of look back on this in 2018. Obviously, Black Panther as a comic existed for so long. It was it had been on the run for decades. But the way, I think it's more about the way that Disney let this film be produced, at least from like Disney, like the Walt Disney Company being a massive corporation, publicly traded and all that. Um, this film seems like a risk when you compare it to the other Marvel movies, how it was made. You look at the production, you look at the themes they were getting at, you look at the soundtrack, especially the soundtrack being like having so many rap and hip hop groups on it, with like, and they didn't hold back on it. They let them, especially with Kendrick Lamar producing so much of the soundtrack, they let him produce it the way they wanted to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of kind of risk factors for, like, quote unquote, like a family company that Walt Disney and the Disney companies really build themselves up as. And with that, in the final production, obviously this is not necessarily like the most family friendly content that they put out there, but it still is really well done and put together. And this is something where, I'm not sure you would like take like 5 or 6 year olds to it, but you take young teens to it, especially in a modern day America, and you let them watch it. And again, Jim and I are both, kind of like Irish American, like white guys, but like we can sense a lot of the pressure and a lot of the frustration that comes off in this film, and also the balance and the fight and the conflict within the African American community, or at least within the African community, and how, there are different viewpoints on how do we move forward as a culture and everything. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to address, even within African American culture or African culture, or any culture for that matter. It could be a Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian. There are multiple ways and multiple viewpoints on how do we kind of address things, how do we move forward. And
even then in the film, it doesn't go quite as deep as what's going on now, because what's going on now is far worse. But
well, and also with that, it's been going on for decades.
It's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
But even in the film, in the final scene, even they acknowledge that T'Challa's idea to open up the borders still contains a lot of risk.
Mm-hmm.
Both the idea that you're kind of, that modernization of very noble traditions can lead to ruin, but at the same time, it's kind of like trying to find the right way that unfortunately America really hasn't been able to do recently.
Hmm.
But one thing that you mentioned to me last night was, you know, we assume that if you're watching this, you've seen the movie, or we want you to see it. But
Absolutely
at
should
the
see
end,
it. Yes.
Black Panther does defeat Killmonger in battle, and he allows Killmonger to see the Wakandan sunset, which his father had always told him that he would show him. And
It's the most beautiful thing
when
in the
he's
world.
dying, T'Challa says, "We can still save you. We can still fix you." And Michael B. Jordan just knocked this scene out of the park. He says, "Why to put me in chains? Why don't you bury me in the ocean with my ancestors, because they knew death was better than bondage?" And you had told me that you had read in an article that that was one of the hardest things for Coogler and the filmmakers to keep in.
Yeah, it was I think of all the lines that initially wanted to be cut out. I'm not sure whether for because of PC culture or for timing or whatever, but it was a line that the writers and Coogler fought to keep in the film. And when you hear it at that point in the film, it's not out of context, but it's such a kind of I guess like kind of haunting line
Yeah.
because like it really, again, it goes back to so many of the themes that this movie has built up to. And it's like, is it, kind of like, going back to the Crucible, is it better to live or to die believing in your values, or is it better to live like living a lie?
Yeah.
And I think it really goes back to that classic theme of how, um, like that's not who Killmonger wanted to be. He would rather die fighting or yeah, die fighting for what he believed in than trying to be a slave or a prisoner or anything or whatever you would call him. And it's just powerful. It really is powerful. If there's one thing I would say about the film, and again, I'm not sure I would 100% agree with some of the reception, like the best picture nomination. Like I will, I'm not trying to fault too much on that. This film is powerful though, and it leaves an impact on you, whether you are white, Hispanic, Asian, African American. It leaves an impact on you, and I think I think for the both of us, like watching it, like we can feel that impact. We can feel the emotion and the power that this movie is portraying. And I didn't get all the jokes for sure. I didn't understand 100% of all of them, but it is immensely powerful for sure.
And that just speaks to the strength of what Coogler and Kevin Feige and a lot of the actors, all their approach was, let's tell a great story first, and then we'll address the superhero element. And don't get us wrong, that this is a superhero movie. There are a lot of great action scenes, and the suit's cool, and everybody can
Music's
fight very
awesome.
well.
All blends well
Ludwig
together.
Göransson's Oscar-winning score is fabulous. But I think that just speaks to the strength that these people, especially T'Challa and his family and Killmonger, their characters first. Their characters and their arcs were sorted out long before what the action would look and sound like. I think that is the secret to Black Panther. And we'll wrap up the video coming back to Chadwick Boseman, because Boseman created a very likable character, but at the same time, he brought a lot of dimension to what could have been a very two-dimensional flat role. He could have been seen as a pinnacle to aspire to, instead of somebody people can relate to. And that again is the secret to Black Panther, is even little kids who do see the film. It is a bit of a dark film, but I think kids nowadays can handle it. Just hearing the videos and seeing the tributes after he passed away of even little kids who are deeply saddened to see somebody, they were so touched to see somebody like them on screen in an age where even now when we try to push for diversity in films, it's still very hard to come by. And seeing Letitia Wright as Shuri, or Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, or even again Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, just seeing a cast that looked like them was such an incredible thing. And Chadwick really nailed T'Challa.
Yeah.
And it really does break my heart to know that he's no longer going to voice that character, because I was so looking forward to it. I hate to use this similarity, but it's very, very so often you get an actor who lands this kind of ubiquitous hero for a lot of people. You had Downey as Iron Man, you had Christopher Reeve as Superman. There's been a lot of Batmans.
Yeah, it's Hugh Jackman as
Hugh
Wolverine.
Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah.
This time they finally had a black actor play a hero where they can say, "Oh, there's the platinum standard.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get to Boseman." It's because he just brought a gentle humanity.
And I think that goes back to so much of his acting style. And
yeah,
I'll admit, I don't know. I don't think that Black Panther is Boseman's best performance. I think, in my opinion, 42 is his best performance playing Jackie Robinson.
I agree.
But you can see, because he did that film before Black Panther, before Captain America: Civil War, where we first saw him, and then later on Black Panther.
Yeah.
But you can see not only the humanity, but the gentleness and the kind of composure and everything that he learned with 42, and he brought that to this movie.
Yeah.
And you see that Boseman was not a person that showed a lot with his body gestures or his voice and everything. He carries so much of his acting on his face, which I think is a sign of a great actor, or at least a certain acting style, that you carry the emotion and the acting within your body and your face. And that was absolutely his style. You felt the heaviness of the scenes by how his face and body was reacting, especially his face, because in this movie especially, there's a lot of upper body shots and kind of seeing it.
There's the face and the eyes too.
And you see all of the emotions there, especially the second time he goes back to the ancestral plane, and you feel like the anger and sadness that he has for his family, but also against his father, that why would you do this? Why would you not bring him back? And you see the tears streaming in his face while he also has the anger. It's so well done. And I know we're trying to wrap up here a little bit, but I was shocked when I saw them. I wasn't even aware that he was sick. I think like a lot of people, we were very surprised when we heard the news. And along with that, not only were we sad, but I think it was also a sadness that came from, he was only 43. We were looking forward to all the work he was going to continue to do and to put out, and also the impact he was going to continue to leave.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think, a lot of that sadness comes from he really did die too young. He was a talent and an impact that died way too young.
Far too young, far before his time. Yeah. And that's another thing too. The more, again, a lot of things come out after somebody dies, an actor, a friend, anybody. But the fact that he was still able to visit, I'm getting choked up just thinking about this. When you see the photos of him going to visit the children in the hospital, and just absolutely making their year while he himself was going through this terrible sickness. It's just that's a hero. And again, it's just he reminds me of Christopher Reeve in the sense that he wasn't just a hero on screen. He became a hero off screen. He became a hero through his actions, not just his part. But that also adds to why Black Panther works so well from his standpoint. Was he was a hero playing a hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's gonna be tough, and obviously and also with that, I think according to some articles, I'm forgetting the year exactly, but it was either 2016 or 2017 that he knew about his diagnosis, and he went on to do all of these films, all these roles, knowing that he had a serious form of cancer.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know the exact word to describe it, but in my opinion, that is greatness, knowing that you don't know how much time that he had left, but he went on and did all these great roles and left such a great impact, knowing that he only had so much time left.
Yeah.
And throughout all of it, he never really let you know, or he never really, like, you can never see it for the most part, um, that he was suffering. And I think that's so powerful. It's
Yeah.
so strong, and it's so sad, and it's heart wrenching. But
Yeah.
I think Chadwick at the end of the day, he knew he wanted to leave an impact on people, and especially
And not even in a deliberate way, but just by bringing his all. Even God, just the sickness, just bringing his all despite everything.
mm-hmm.
That just to me is the sign of a good man and a good actor.
Mm-hmm. A great human being.
Yeah, one of the great tragedies in a year, just chock full of them. That one stung really, really badly.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where they necessarily go from here or anything. I'm not sure if it's because we were doing this recording about a few weeks or maybe a month after he passed away.
Yeah,
so
we didn't want to do this right afterwards. We wanted to properly let people properly let people have it out.
Give him time to mourn and process everything.
Pay respects to him personally before we decided.
And I'm not sure where the series go from here. We've in offhand conversations we've talked about a couple ideas, but it'll be interesting to see where the Black Panther franchise goes from here. But with that said, whoever is coming into the role next, they are going to have, I think, impossible shoes to fill.
That's true. And I did read an article recently that Disney has more or less confirmed that Black Panther 2 is still going to happen, that the script was ready, but of course they're going to delay it because they need to rewrite the screenplay. Mm-hmm. And their idea, and this is based on comic book precedents, that Shuri, who's played by Letitia Wright, who I will say is hilarious and wonderful throughout the film as the tech nerd, his sister.
Has her own personality.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a strong, developed woman, and that the idea is that based on the comic history, that Shuri will fill the shoes of the Black Panther. Not only would it make sense as she's a member of the royal family, the sister of T'Challa, but in the comics too, I learned this recently, that he had been injured for a couple months. They took him out of action, and that Shuri filled the shoes quite well. Mm-hmm. And again, this is just pure speculation, but I think that would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. It would definitely be a good, I mean, obviously it's not an interpretation because it's an actual way the comics went, everything. So it's true to the source material.
Yeah.
But, and also with that, you made a comment a while back that, as much as Chadwick was an inspiration to African-American men, Shuri could be an inspiration to African-American women in the same right. And I think that could also be very powerful. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but I think that's also a very strong inspiration.
Yes.
And so
what I'm trying to get at is this is one of the most wonderful worlds I've seen. And even if it is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I will gladly go back and see it if they feel that they can. Because again, it made such an impact. Chadwick made such an impact. The film inspired so many that I just hope that they can carry on both in his legacy and the legacy of the characters.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think there's enough history, culture, and source material that they'll be able to find a way to continue on with it. But again, this is going to be a hole that's hard to fill. I don't deny that. I mean, there are plenty of other examples of how comic book movies struggled to follow up after a major actor either passed away or didn't come back to a role. But I think the bigger message and what I think Chadwick really wanted to pass along was the inspiration that he could bring to this, and the inspiration he could bring to so many men, women, especially those of African American and minority communities. And you could see from the impact he brought. And I think there's nothing better. At the end of the day, he would have wanted more than to bring that impact to those people. And I think he delivered on that
Yeah.
1,000%. Even like we just saw the reactions and the outpouring of emotion after his death. He's left a truly remarkable impact, especially on our generation.
And to end positively here too, what really pleases me too is while he was indeed the first and so far the best, I don't think he'll be the last. I'm sure there'll be a lot more great performances of Black Panther and many more African American heroes. Marvel's pushing its first Asian superhero, and there have been several people of the transgender community cast as superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because of this that this film really has helped
Part of which
break the barrier too.
Part of which because it was so successful,
Yes.
but also we were watching a little behind the scenes series after watching it last night.
Yeah.
The comic book series was so successful, and along that successful, like yes, it did produce a lot of money, but you know, it showed that there are people out there, whether it is the same community and market that they are appealing to initially with all their other products, or that there are other target markets out there that they are getting with these film and comic book series. And I think that has shown that there is a huge market out there for this. And when done well and done with the proper appreciation and composure, that these film and comic book and whatever series, they are loved and appreciated and can have such a powerful impact.
Yes.
And I think, and hopefully we get to see more out of these because, again, we saw the beauty and the culture and the power that came from just one film.
Yeah.
This was one film, and it had such an impact. And I'm excited to see where else this can go, honestly.
Yeah.
With other series and everything.
Me too. It found its audience, and it's inspired many, not just in its own audience, but around the world.
Absolutely.
And again, we'll end this. Much of the credit goes to Chadwick.
Absolutely.
Rest in peace, our king.
Mm-hmm. So with that, this is Jim and Parker's Excellent Podcast. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Parker Glazner.
I'm Jim Crowley.
We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.